Class 110 on the Golden Doves. We're in page 63 on the bottom paragraph, in the middle of the bottom paragraph. The sentence beginning, right, before a thing, right after footnote 14. Yep. It's another chilly morning in June, atypical, but it's low 50s. That's why I'm wearing a sweater, but really beautiful. Enjoying the cool weather while it lasts. Before a thing becomes a sign and signifies, it must shed its ontological dimensions, right? So the only way something can signify is if you look past the object, right? So an object, let's say in Jewish thinking, the world is semiological, so things signify, objects or the creations signify things outside of themselves, right? So you look at the beauty of creation, and that points outwardly towards something else, as any sign, as the word, as I said, the word book points not to the word book, but to something outside of itself, like a book, right? So ontology says no, that things just exist, objects exist. In semiology, objects point out to something else. They're signs. That's the idea of semiology versus ontology. So in order to look at the world as signs, you have to look beyond the object as an object and now start viewing the object not in metaphysical terms, but in semiological terms as signs. I believe that's one of the objects of Maaseh Bereshit, perhaps. Right? Maaseh Bereshit, the creations, to view the creations in the sense of what do they represent and what do they mean and what is being spoken here. Yeah. Creation ex nihilo implies not only design. So when you say that the God created the world from nothing, yesh me'ayin, it doesn't just mean that the world is designed. Well, yes, the world was designed, right? Because if there was nothing, you need to have a design, right? But also intentionality in its semiological sense, right? Because when I take a word, I say I want for now the sound apple to represent the apple, right? So there's a certain intentionality there because it's arbitrary. So, or I say no, I don't want the word apple. I like the word tapuach. So the word tapuach will signify apple. Again, there's that intentionality. It's related to arbitrariness, right? So because I arbitrarily choose the signs, the sounds that will present whatever they represent, that's intentionality. So now I'm designing the language. So the word apple is not the word orange, right? So I'm structuring the language. There's intentionality there. Similarly, in the creations, there's a certain intentionality. So that's what's meant by intentionality in the semiological sense, because in semiology, there's nothing inherent in the word apple, right, that brings about the apple, right? So that's intentionality in the semiological sense, rather than intention in the teleological sense, which is metaphysical, right? So intention means, for example, society will be filled with love, right? And it's going towards the direction of the true platonic metaphysical love. That's the teleology, means the direction in which things are going. And then you will reach that platonic love. And then you're in the static state of love, right? Note that no one brings more hatred to the world than those who preach love, right? Case in point, the Spanish Inquisition, right? But I'm digressing. But you understand what's meant by teleology. So teleology is a very metaphysical concept, that there is a purpose, and we are going towards that purpose. I think it was the great philosopher and brilliant replacement for Jesus. His name was Barack Obama, and he spoke about the arc of history, right? So the arc of history is such. So that's teleology. Creation, or the eternity of the world, depends solely on how one wishes to relate to this world and to perceive it. So you can choose. It's a choice. There is no proof that the world was created. There was also no proof For those ignorant scientists that say, no, the world was not created. I mean, there was no proof for that, right? It could be this way, it could be that way, right? We acknowledge it. The world could have been eternal, right? Creation or the eternity of the world, you can't prove it one way or the other. Even the Big Bang Theory, I mean, it's not a proof, it's a theory. Maybe at one point it was a dot, then it became big, then it collapsed to a dot, then it became big. Maybe this is happening forever, right? Again, scientifically speaking, it's possible. Right? So you have to make a choice. You have to choose. Do you believe in creation ex nihilo, or you believe in an eternal world? And the answer is, well, how do you view the world? If the world just exists, eternality, then the world just exists. It's just objects are ontological objects with metaphysical significance. Right? There is no significance to a world that just existed. It just always was there. So why would it have significance? The only way for the world to have significance is when you say that the world was created. Because the minute you say the world was created, well, there was a purpose to this and a purpose to that and a meaning in different things, right? So creation implies semiology. Eternality implies metaphysics. So make your choice. This beautiful world, it's just a coincidence? Yeah, you could say that. I can protest and say, no, you must believe that the world is beautiful and that this is the handiwork of an artist. You want to not see the art? Don't. Right? It's a choice. If one wishes to perceive the world in ontic ontological terms, there is little need to postulate creation. Things just exist onto themselves. Then you don't need creation. Conversely, creation is postulated when one wishes to relate to the world as a semiological system. You think there's meaning in your life? You believe in creation. You think your life is meaningless? You're just an object, right? There is no free will, as the pseudo-scientists such as Yuval Harari and other pseudo-intellectuals want to say. No problem. So that's it. So your life is meaningless. You are ultimately nothing. You're just a stone. I mean, maybe a more sophisticated stone, right? But that's ultimately all you are. And that's what they say. We're just machines. And therefore, and based on that philosophy, machines will eventually take over. And they say so explicitly. They say that humanity will transform into some sort of machine, to some sort of AI, right? The only choice, the only way out of it, to say, no, my life is meaningful. My choices matter. I make choices. The only way to say that is you believe in a creator. By the way, if you looked at a textbook from 60 years ago, you would see 4 types of, very small number of mental illnesses. I don't know the exact number. You see a textbook from now, although there's hundreds and hundreds of new psychological, by mental illness, I mean psychological illnesses. So if a person is overweight, that's an illness. It's not a choice that he made to overeat. It's an illness. And again, I'm not condemning fat people, of course not. And I understand that there are genetic predispositions. I'm talking about psychology now, right? So I'm not talking about a person who is overweight because he has a genetic defect, but there are people who engage in binge eating. So today it's designated as a mental illness. Why? Oh, because there's no free choice. So it's an illness you have. So you have no choice. You're mentally ill, right? So that's why they now they now have fat models, right? Because you can't be against them. Why would you be against somebody for being fat? It's just as beautiful as non-fat. But you see this, like you understand the thinking behind here. They're trying to say that if you're fat, you're a victim of your genetics. I'm not saying that's not the case. There are cases of fat people who are victims of genetics. Please do not misquote me. But there are many cases where person just doesn't want to control his impulses. Same thing with drugs. There are people who are drug addicts. That's a mental illness, right? The Torah says, no, you have a choice. You can choose not to do drugs, right? Or you can choose to do drugs. The Yuval Hararis of the world, they say, no, you don't have a choice. You're programmed. So therefore, how can you explain the fact that this guy's a drug addict? Oh, it was a mental illness, right? This person is violent. That's a mental illness, right? By saying it's a mental, and I'm not saying there are no cases of people who have violence in them that is uncontrollable due to certain types of psychoses. I acknowledge that. But not every case of violence And not in every case of violence is a person a victim. There are cases where people choose violence. Really important to understand. But today, it's in the psychology textbook, it would be considered a mental illness. Why is it today considered a mental illness? What is a proliferation of mental illnesses? Because we've decided to make a choice as a society that people don't make choices, right? We've decided to choose the path of metaphysics. We just exist. We have a genetic code. We're programmed to act the way we act. And therefore, these are mental illnesses. This is in contradistinction to the Torah that says not everything is a mental illness. There are mental illnesses. I've acknowledged that already. But in many cases, there are people who make bad choices. So if your life has meaning, and if your choices have meaning, and if the world has meaning, you will probably, right? You probably want to choose life. You may not. Nobody's going to force you. And if your life has no meaning, and if the world has no meaning, if the world just exists, then everything is a mental illness. And there are no real criminals that go on the street, rampaging in the streets of Chicago, killing people, right? They're the victims, right? No, not the people. The victims of the criminals are not the victims. The criminals are the victims. And now you understand what's happening in America. What's happening in America is America capitulated to Greek metaphysics. America was always based on freedom of identity, freedom of individuality. We make choices. You can choose to pursue happiness. We won't make you happy. You can pursue happiness, right? America has capitulated to Greek metaphysics, which says, no, you're a victim. You are a victim. You're a victim of your race. You're a victim of your genetics. And the world just exists. And if the world just exists and criminals are victims, why shouldn't they be allowed in the street like I am, right? So let the victims go in the street. And if I work hard and that person doesn't work hard, he should be entitled to universal income. Why shouldn't he be entitled to universal income? I work hard, not because of my choices, because of my genetics. He doesn't work because of his genetics. Should he be condemned to that? So you see where Greek metaphysics leads to? It's unbelievable. Our society is literally disintegrating. And I'd like to compare American cities like San Francisco, like Portland, Oregon, like parts of Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago. I'd like to compare it to Sodom va'Amorah. But perhaps I would be insensitive to the residents of Sodom va'Amorah because they really didn't reach the level that we've reached today in the United States of America. Getting back to the book. Right. Creation is postulated when one wishes to relate to the world as a semiological system. Right? It's a choice. You don't have to do it, and nobody will force you to do it. If you believe your life is meaningless, go in the street, rampage, engage in criminal activity, see where that brings you, what fulfillment brings you in life. Answer, none. Right? But you will be like the monkeys in the jungle. That would be the great teleological accomplishment of Western society, that we've reduced ourselves to monkeys. Language. Remember, we had freedom, language, and negativity. Now we're going to talk. So we talk about freedom, the arbitrariness of language, the freedom to choose, the freedom to view the world in semiological terms, and now we're going to be dealing with the word language. Next class.